Hi, this is Pope-Seiberling again with you for our final installation of the I Saw the Sign series. Today we're going to be talking about exterior signage. This is, of course, the signage that is outside of your building. I want to briefly talk to you about the purpose of exterior signage. The purpose of exterior signage at first sounds really obvious. We want people to know when they've arrived at our church. If they're looking for a church, we want them to be able to read the sign and know that they are in the right place. However, I also want to point out that the church market is actually in most neighborhoods a very crowded market. It is not unusual to drive down a street in any town, anywhere in the United States, and have 4 or 5 churches on one street. When this is the case, your signage is even more important because you want people to recognize the name of your church. You want them to be able to distinguish your church from all the other churches on your block. And signage can really help you do that. Quality signage can. Another purpose of your signage is you want people to know how to get into your church. I cannot tell you how many churches I have been to where I can see the church from the road, or I can see the church from the highway, but I have no idea how to get to the church. Or I pull into the parking lot of a church and I have no idea how to get into the building. So church signage also helps people know how to physically get in to your church. Next, I want to talk to you about specialized signage. And specialized signage is signage that has a unique purpose, such as designation of handicapped parking. In a lot of churches, and I think this is a great idea, they have special parking for first-time visitors and guests. And some churches even have special parking for second-time and third-time visitors and guests. I think that's wonderful. But that is specialized signage, and that is something to consider. In a lot of cases, the signage is indicated by what we would think of pole signage, so it's on a pole, or it is directly onto the blacktop or the parking lot. One thing I like churches to consider before they put their exterior signage in is to consider the architecture of the building. On the left, we have a very modern looking church. In the middle, we have a country church. And in the right, we have a Gothic style church. I would not recommend the same type of signage for all 3 of these buildings. Each 3 of these buildings need to consider the architecture of their building, and their sign should match or complement the architecture of their building. Another thing to remember with exterior signage is exterior signage, more so than interior signage, needs to be very big and very eye-catching and very bold. I have what's called the 40-40 rule. Make sure that your sign can be read at 40 feet going 40 miles an hour. If your sign cannot be read at the 40-40 rule, your signage is not bold enough, It's not big enough, and it's not bright enough. It has to be bigger, bolder, and brighter. I am telling you, you will be shocked at how small things look at 40 feet. The further away your sign is from where you want people to see it, the bigger it has to be, or the more flashy it has to be. This is why so many churches have gone to exterior electronic signage. It's not because it's cheap. I can tell you right now, electronic signage is the most expensive form of exterior signage. They do it for its versatility. Electronic signage can be easily changed out. Electronic signage catches the eye because they're able to use color, and electronic signage is also eye-catching at night because it's lit up. It's electronic. Another thing I like churches to consider when they're putting out signage is how are you going to advertise special events? The old church signage where you take out the letters and you put in the letters is fine, but the reality is that special events can be better communicated in other ways. We've already talked about electronic signage, but is there a space for banner signage or for other types of signage that would be interchangeable that you can advertise special events? One tip I like to give, if your church has a special event regularly, you can use signage over and over again if you keep dates off of things and you consistently have the event at the same time. So for example, the second Saturday of March, you have an event, put that, and then that sign can be used again next year. I want to talk to you about how to conduct an exterior audit of signage. We talked about conducting an interior signage audit in the last podcast, and today I want to talk to you about how to conduct an exterior signage audit. The first thing you have to do is drive past your church. As you drive past your church, you're going to get your friend or your spouse or your kid to take your cell phone, and you are going to take video of what it looks like to drive past your church. Okay? So what that video footage is actually going to show you is whether or not your current signage can be seen from the angle at which you approach your church. So if your church sits on a corner, please be sure to come from your church or drive into your church from every possible angle. You're going to go east, and then you're going to turn around and you're going to take video going west. If you have a north or south road, you're going to go north, and then you're going to turn around and take video footage coming south. So make sure you're going from all different angles and all different directions possible to approach your building and your church signage. The next thing you're going to do is you're going to look at these videos or these pictures that you've taken, and you're going to ask yourself, from this video and the footage, can I see, is it obvious to me how to get to the church? And can I see the signage? Is the signage visible and easy to get to? We all think our church signage is clear, but what I find is that sometimes from one direction the signage is good, but when you come from another direction, the signage isn't as clear and it's not as visible. We might discover that there's bushes in front of our trees that maybe is an inexpensive fix, that those things can be cut back. So make sure that you ask yourself those questions. Another thing I like churches to do for your audit is to drive by at night. ask yourself, is there sufficient lighting for our signage? Can we see at night how to get to our church? After you've done that, you're going to pull into every entrance of your building. So even if that is not a parking lot entrance that's currently used or that people use very often, I still want you to pull into that parking lot and see if you know how to get into the building. Okay? So pretend you're trying to go to church on Sunday morning. Would you know how to do that from pulling into your church? If you don't know how to do that, that might be a great opportunity to place signage to make that really clear for first-time guests. The fourth thing I encourage churches and people to do is ask people who don't go to your church to put your church address in their GPS and to find their way into the parking lot of your church. I am telling you this because this is how first-time guests are actually receiving directions to get into your church parking lot. It used to be back in the day that people would call up the church and say, I'd like to come to your church. Can you give me directions? And the lovely secretary, whomever he or she would be on the other end of the line, would say, well, we would love to have you with us. And they might ask their name, strike up a little conversation, and then they would give them very specific directions. They would tell them what the landmarks are. They would tell them if there was a quirky way to get into your parking lot. They would tell them what door to enter to get to your sanctuary. But people don't do that anymore. They do a web search. They type it into their phones. They type the address into their cars. And that is how they get directions. You might be shocked to find out that the GPS has people coming to your church always from a particular direction. Or that the GPS even puts your church in the wrong location along a particular street. I can tell you, we live on the main street in the little town that we live in, and if you were to put my home address in your GPS, you would think that we live at the local Taco Bell, because for whatever reason, the GPS thinks that our home address is the Taco Bell. Okay? So, this is how people are finding your church. So when you ask people to do this and then you talk to them, you ask them, was it easy to find our church? What direction did you come from? There's only one thing you need to do from there, and that is listen. You need to truly listen to what people are telling you about your signage and the ease of getting into your church building from the street. It is very, very easy when we're talking about a high cost item like exterior signage to not listen to what people are telling us, because the cost of listening has a price tag on it. But I would say to you that the cost of not listening for a church is much, much higher than a sign. We need to be experiencing our churches like a first-time guest does. I was just at a church consulting the other weekend, and signage was actually one of the things I had come to look at with them. And I was looking for their church, and I actually drove right by their church. Even though I was looking for it, I drove right past it. When I told them that, they said, but the sign is right there. And I said to them, you need to listen what I'm telling you. I knew your church was somewhere in the area, I had already driven past 3 churches that weren't your church, and I just drove past your church even though I was looking for it. Another sign is in order, or moving the sign you currently have is in order. People are going to tell you things like that, and you're not going to want to listen. But I would really encourage you to take what your visitors and what the people who you've encouraged to come and give you feedback say. These people who are asking feedback from, who are taking these pictures, who were looking at this stuff, have no reason to lie to us. They have no reason to saddle us with an expensive bill for another sign. And this is the thing. If our visitors can't find our buildings, if our visitors can't find their way into our sanctuaries, how are they ever going to find their way to us? How are they ever going to find their way to a relationship with Jesus Christ, which is really the most important thing in all of this signage discussion? Is we want people to be able to find our church so they can find the most important thing in life, and that is Jesus Christ. So, good luck with your exterior audit. I hope that I've given you a lot to think about. I hope I've given you many things to consider, and I hope that this would be a great tool for your church as they finalize and hone and sharpen their exterior signage. Have a great day. Thanks for listening.